Well, let's talk about electricity. The way we were going to do this in class is you were going to, in your groups, get what we call our electricity discovery kit, which was a bag that had wire, batteries, a buzzer, a motor, and a light bulb in it. And then we were going to let you all make circuits. And then when you'd finish making circuits, you were going to have to make a switch. Basically, that's kind of what I'm going to do here this afternoon to work you through it so you will know how to make a circuit and switches if you need to use that in your classroom sometime. Electricity is a lot of fun and it's a great thing for students to study and learn about, and it's very foundational as far as technology goes. In the PowerPoint that you were supposed to check out, there were it was mentioned there were 5 ways to generate electricity: heat, light, magnetism, which is how we generate most electricity in the U.S., pressure, and then chemical. For our applications here, we're going to strictly use electricity from chemical energy, which is batteries. There's a couple things that I want to point out about batteries. And first of all, that's the different types of batteries that you typically find in a household. So first of all, you have your D-cell battery. Another type of battery that you have, I know you're familiar with, is the AA battery. And then the third one is the AAA battery. Now, one thing all these batteries, these 3 batteries have in common is they're the same voltage. Each one produces 1.5 volts. So why do we have the different size batteries? Well, it just comes down basically to convenience. You obviously wouldn't want a TV remote that has to be big enough to hold these suckers. So we make a AAA battery, which is much smaller. Now, the advantage to the bigger battery is that because there's more chemicals in it, in theory, all other things being equal, it should last longer. I'll come back to the 9-volt battery in just a minute. So I was talking about voltage with these batteries, and your 2 most fundamental principles when you're talking about electricity are probably voltage and current, or voltage and amperage. Voltage, and this again was in the PowerPoint, but just to review it, voltage is an electromotive force. It is the force, or sometimes I like to think of it as the push behind the current. That's why people can survive lightning strikes, which are hundreds of thousands of volts, because lightning is high voltage but low amperage or low current. Now the trick is each person is different. So, and also the more voltage there is, the more amperage there will be. That's Ohm's law. And so you don't know how much voltage or current you might be able to withstand. So that's why we don't mess around with lightning. And then another thing you need to remember about current and electricity is it's always seeking the ground. And I always point this out to students every year that I've done this, every semester. Heaven forbid that you're ever in this situation. But if you are ever in a car wreck and somehow or other a power line gets broken and is laying on your car, the safest thing to do is to stay in the car, call the power company, and have them shut down that part of the grid so then you can get out of the car. However, if you were to smell gasoline or something like that and feel like you need to get out of the car, you have to jump out of the car. Because if you put one foot on the ground and your other foot is still in the car, then the current that is flowing basically around you, you now are grounded and the current is going to flow through you and you will be electrocuted. So I'm just putting that out there. Again, hopefully that's not anything that'll ever happen to you. And by the way, when you do jump out of the car, if one end of the power line is on your car, make sure you know where the other one is before you jump. So hopefully that'll never be an issue. So let's talk about these circuits that I made. In your discovery kit, I mentioned there would be a light bulb. Now also, one of the things you need to remember with the light bulbs is if you use this 9-volt battery, it has too much voltage, too much current, and it will burn this light bulb out. If you look at it very closely, you can see the filament is very, very, very thin. I mean, maybe even less than a hair in thickness, and so that will burn this bulb out. It'll burn really bright, and then it will stop. So you want to make sure that you're not using a 9-volt battery with a light bulb like this. There's a couple of different types. This type, as you can see, you push it in and turn it to lock it in place, and then you would connect the wires here. I kind of prefer this type because students are a little more familiar with it because it simply screws into place. And then you connect the wires on each side of the light bulb. So you have to have in your switch, you have a terminal, if you want to call it that. And of course, we use the brads, which we use for everything else too. So you push brads through. This is a piece of foam core. It is a little pricey compared to a lot of other things you could use. You could also use a thin piece of cardboard. But whatever you use, it needs to be something fairly rigid that'll stand up to the brads. So you push the brads through, and then you're going to take a wire from one side of the battery holder and wire it in here. And the best thing to do is to strip enough wire, and these are ideal wire strippers for this. This particular type of wire stripper works really, really well. But you want to expose enough wire so that you can wrap it around this brad, and then you fold the legs of the brad down to hold that wire in place. And then you're going to take the wire from the other side of the light bulb to the other terminal on your switch. Now again, notice we have a wire from one side of the light bulb to here, and then we have a second wire that comes from the battery pack right to here. These are wired together just to give me a little more length. And then you use the paper clip on top, and the paper clip completes the circuit. I'm just going to hold this in place. And you can see, hopefully you can see the light bulb. Let me fix my paper clip in here a little better. You'll be able to see the light bulb glowing. I'll hold that up for you. There we go. If it doesn't work, then the first thing to check is make sure you don't have dead batteries, and then it's probably just a connection with the wires. So you'll want to check those, and that's pretty bright, so that works really well. Now this particular type of a circuit is a series circuit, which means there's only one pathway for the electricity to go. The other type of circuit is a parallel circuit, and you could use those. You would need extra wire, and you could probably want to have a second bulb wired into the circuit. So again, this is using the light bulb, and again, notice that I used 2 AA batteries, so there's 3 volts in that circuit. This one, and this is one that students always really enjoy. It's the buzzer. There were in your Discovery kits, there were buzzers, not as big as this one, much smaller. This one is more of a chirping type of buzzer. The ones that were in your kits were more of a me type of, emitted that type of sound. And of course, it drives everybody crazy when they're all going off in class at one time, but believe me, your students will love it. One thing to remember about buzzers, if you wire it up and it doesn't work, sometimes buzzers have to be wired up a certain way. Negative has to be wired, positive has to be wired a certain way. So if it doesn't work, then what you need to do is just switch the wire from on your buzzer and your battery pack, and hopefully then it would work. That's called having polarity. Some buzzers have polarity and some do not. And I probably should have exposed a little bit more wire here because it keeps coming loose. But again, the buzzers that we had for you all are much smaller. I'm not sure, when Radio Shack was in business, showing my age there, but when Radio Shack was in business, that was a good place to get them, but I'm sure you can find small buzzers on Amazon. Yeah, that's really obnoxious. I found this in one of the drawers I had here, and just with some miscellaneous stuff in it. And I first tested it with a 9-volt battery. Oh my gosh, I thought I was going to go deaf. It is really piercingly loud. So that's your buzzer. And then one other thing that we had in your kit for you was an electric motor. These electric motors, these come from a company called Kelvin. In the course pack, I don't remember if there's a resource list in there or not, but just remember the name Kelvin is a really good company to use. This particular motor probably cost about 70 cents. And I use these motors over and over and over again. And as long as your kids don't drop them, they should last many, many, many years. So again, you see that completes the circuit, and that works. It's a little counterintuitive because when your circuit is closed, current will flow. But when it's open, then current doesn't flow. One thing I wanted to point out with this, Kathy, if you can really close up on this gear, I want you to notice the rotation of the gear. All right, hopefully you can see that. All right, and then give me just a minute. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the wires on this terminal. Wire that you get, there's actually two different types. This particular type of wire is called stranded wire, and you'll notice that there's a lot of wires that come out in the end, you know, kind of like fingers. So that's stranded wire. You can also get solid wire. Either one works. They work together. It doesn't matter if you can put this, you can wrap the stranded wire around the solid wire and it works just fine. Sometimes the solid wire is a little easier to use, but the problem with solid wire is once you have bent it and wrapped it, and you bend it and wrap it again, and you bend it and wrap it again, eventually it starts to break. So as soon as I can get this out of there, I really twisted that in there pretty good. So instead of wiring this up necessarily, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold it to the terminals and see what happens with the gear. Oops, let me close my switch first. All right, can you see which way that's rotating? All right, now let me change the wires on the motor. And hopefully you can see that now it's rotating in the other direction. So that's kind of cool. Sometimes when your students, if they're building a device that uses gears and they've got it set up a certain way and they wire it up, put the switch in, and whatever it is runs backwards, and they go, oh no, I have to change my motor. No, they don't have to change anything. All they need to do is just switch the wires on the motor. So your big project for this electricity unit, there were two. One of them was the candy safe, as we call it, which was basically a wooden box, and we were going to give you a buzzer or let you use a light bulb, and you were going to